It's funny how in this episode, Supergirl struggles to hold on to game night and her crush on Jimmy Olsen, because I also had a struggle to like this episode. Let's just get into it. Hi, welcome to My Geek Therapy, where you help me and I help you process everything in the world of geek. And today, we're talking about the latest episode of Supergirl. Now, this episode is called Red Faced, and I have to tell you, I need this therapy session because I need to get some things off my chest. The episode is actually about General Lane showing up to National City and testing Supergirl with this new android that the government has built called the Red Tornado. Now, if you're not familiar with the Red Tornado, he is a very prominent part of DC Comics. The Red Tornado is an android created by Dr. T.O. Morrow and also Professor Ivo. The android is actually created to be a foil to the Justice League, and then later on actually becomes a member of the team once it becomes a sentient being and can think on its own, and becomes a very prominent and important part of the team. And if you're still confused about who the android Red Tornado is, just think of Vision from the Avengers with a lot more red and burgundy in that costume. Now, while there were some positive moments in this episode, there were a lot more negatives. So let's go ahead and get that off our chest. First of all, the Red Tornado's costume looked horrible. I mean, it looked like a costume you would get from a Halloween store like Party City, but not on Halloween or a couple of weeks before Halloween or a couple of weeks after Halloween. Like a month after Halloween, when you're digging through the bargain bin and you happen to find the costumes that nobody wanted. Sumo wrestler. Ninja, Falcon. Sorry, Falcon, but nobody wanted your costume last year or this year. And then what's on the very bottom? This Red Tornado costume that was in this show. Now, granted, the Red Tornado looked amazing when he was flying. Okay, amazing is a stretch, but you know, what are you going to do? This is a network television show. You got to kind of lower your expectations. This costume looks like there's a person actually attempting to cosplay for the first time as the Red Tornado. I mean, the costume looks like they took the worst parts of the Atom from Arrow, Iron Man, and the Flash and rolled them all together and created the Red Tornado. Speaking of the Flash, there's actually a scene in this episode where the Red Tornado throws out a massive tornado. But how does Supergirl stop the tornado? She flies inside of it and flies around real fast. Now, in comic book logic, that works. But it just looks too similar to scenes that we've seen from the Flash. Now, Arrow, Flash, and Supergirl all share the same production company, but it feels like they're taking the scraps of Arrow and the scraps of Flash and then producing it as Supergirl. Something else that really bothered me about this episode is the fact that we got the debut of General Lane. And yes, that's Lois Lane's father, and yes, that is Lucy Lane's father, who is now a reoccurring character on this show. What's upsetting me about this is the fact that we got Lucy Lane a couple of episodes ago. Now we have General Lane. When are we going to get to see Lois Lane? Now, DC, Warner Brothers, you already came out and admitted that your cinematic movies and your television shows do not take place in the same universe. But if that's the case, then why can't we see a television version of Superman and a television version of Lois Lane on this show? You've given us mentions of Batman on Arrow and Flash. You've given us silhouettes of Superman saving Supergirl, but you haven't cast any actors to play this part. If you're not going to give us Superman and you're not going to give us Lois Lane, then stop teasing us with their relative. While Supergirl has an extensive roster of characters of her own, you're going to pull in other characters from Superman to make it more relatable to the audience. Pull in people that actually make sense. Pull in Perry White, Pete Ross, Lana Lang. All of these to me would make more sense to be in National City than keep bringing in members of the Lane family and then showing us silhouettes of Superman saving his cousin. I'm sick of it. Stop. And speaking of the word cousin, I am so sick of that word on this show. As a matter of fact, let's play a drinking game. Maybe at some point I'll do a live viewing of Supergirl. We can all play a drinking game and take a shot every time we hear the word cousin on this show. I get I get it. I am a comic book fan. I understand. I know better than most that Superman and Kara are cousins. I also understand that Kara is actually technically older than Superman, but when she left Krypton, her ship actually got off course and landed on Earth after Superman was already a hero. We understand that, but there's no need to keep bringing up the fact that Superman is her cousin. Every time I turn around is, your cousin would have done that. Your cousin wouldn't have done that. Your cousin couldn't even take that hit. You should call your cousin. The government's afraid of your cousin. Can you call your cousin? I am sick of hearing of the word cousin. If you're not going to give us Superman, if you're not going to cast an actor to play Superman, then stop showing us Superman. Stop talking about him. Stop mentioning him. Have him disappear. I don't care. Also, I feel like you are devaluing Supergirl as a hero and as a main character by constantly bringing up the fact that she has a more famous, more heroic super cousin. It makes no sense. The show is named Supergirl. If you want to do all that, call the show Superman's Cousin. It's called Supergirl. Therapy is about to get a lot better. Because while there were a lot of negatives about this episode, there were still some positives that make me look forward to next week's episode. First of all, Melissa Benoist. She is fantastic. If you're a fan of Glee, well, that's her. She falls seamlessly into being Kara and then putting on the suit and being Supergirl. Her mannerisms, I think, could be a little more exaggerated to show more of a difference. Like, she should be more of a klutz like Kara, and then possibly bring up how her cousin Clark is a klutz. I think actually that connection would work. But as of right now, a couple episodes into this season, she is just so good. I believe her as Kara. I believe her as Supergirl. And then of course we get a couple of fights in this episode. 3 fights with Supergirl and the Red Tornado. But that first fight was the best. She beats the paint off that android. If you think the Captain America trailer where Winter Soldier and Cap are beating the brakes off Iron Man, you haven't seen anything until you've seen Supergirl beat the brakes off the Red Tornado. Something else that we see in this episode that's really surprising is Kara actually stands up to Cat Grant. Now, Kara is Cat Grant's assistant, and Cat Grant runs a Daily Planet type company called Catco. Cat just berates her, never gets her name right, just talks trash to her every episode. Until this episode, Kara finally builds up, and she just has enough, and she unleashes, and she said, "You cannot talk to me like that. I don't deserve that. I'll work hard for you. You are mean. You are a mean woman, Cat Grant." Did Kara just stand up for herself? It was amazing. It was so great to see Kara, meek and mild, stand up for herself and stand up to her big bad boss, Cat Grant. And finally, to end this therapy session, I know there were a lot more negatives than there seemed to be positives, but the final scene in this show made me definitely want to tune in next week. There's a scene where Cat and Kara are talking. Kara drops a glass on the floor. Cat tells her, "Be careful, you'll cut yourself, don't worry about it." She's like, "No, I'm fine." Because she's Supergirl, she reaches up and she actually cut her finger on a piece of glass. Now, there are tons of ways that they can spin this. The clips from next week's episode does show that, in fact, Supergirl has lost her powers, but how? Has she been infected with some form of kryptonite? Has that little magic pixie, Mr. Mxpixelic, made his way into Supergirl? Was she infected by something from Red Tornado or from Dr. T.O. Morrow? Did General Lane secretly do something to her to stop her powers? I don't know what it is, but I will be definitely tuning in next week to find out. So that's it. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and having a little therapy. I feel so much better getting that off my chest. But if you want to keep this therapy session going, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe below, and I'll see you soon.